The three most nonsensical words in the English language are war of choice. And yet here we are in another one. As a former Army intelligence officer who served in Afghanistan, I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes going through the latest in Iran and offering you my perspective. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54. It's just me this week, and we have about a half as long of a show, and I want to spend the entire time talking about Iran. And I want to start with this clip of Pete Buttigieg talking about the Iranian regime on cable news. Here we go.
This is personal for me. You know, when I was in Afghanistan, anytime that we were taking our vehicle outside the wire, when I was driving a vehicle between Kabul and Bagram, I knew that the IEDs that were the greatest threat to the lives of me and everybody in my vehicle could contain what were called EFPs, explosively formed projectiles, that were killing American troops left and right, that could have killed us, and that were supplied by the Iranians. They were a gift from the Ayatollah. So we should have no illusions about the Iranian regime. The question is it a smart move for the United States to launch a war committing American blood and treasure to overthrow a leader, especially when there is no plan or vision for what will come next? It's not even clear that this president is determined to overthrow the regime versus just kill some of the leaders while the broader regime remains intact. There are other ways to keep America safe, and what we have learned, frankly, the hard way in my lifetime, is launching a reckless, chosen war, when that is not your only option, can unleash chaos that makes Americans even less safe.
I wanted to start here because this is exactly the right framing. And the reason that I think this is such vital framing is because what we have seen over the past several days is an attempt by those on the right, knowing that their stuff ain't selling, that the American people are not buying it, and that they don't support this war. They're trying to sell the idea that somehow the American left is rooting for the Ayatollah and rooting for the Iranian regime. And that it could not be further from the case. When you talk to people about this, you have to make clear that you understand that the Iranian regime has sponsored terror and has assisted attempts to kill Americans, and in many cases has killed Americans all throughout the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, I served in Afghanistan as well. I commanded convoys on that very route that Pete is talking about there. And I went to a bunch of other places as well. And that was a real threat. It was a real threat in general from the Taliban and from Al-Qaeda, but the EFPs were a real threat, and we knew that they came from Iran. And, you know, there's many other instances. I don't have to list them because the administration has gone out of their way to list them all week long. Now, that said, we need to establish that it is not a question of who the bad guys are here. The Iranian regime are not the good guys. We understand that. We understand that the American pilots who are trying to do their job, the American service members who are doing their job, to the extent that there are good guys in a war, we have to understand that they're the ones who are on the side that come from a country that is actually in favor of freedom and women's rights and democracy and that sort of thing. That hasn't changed. That doesn't in any way mean that it is smart to actually go into this war of choice. And it definitely doesn't mean that it is right or good to start a war long before you actually have to. And that, I think, is the most important point that we still need to make in any discussion that we have about the war in Iran. These negotiations were ongoing. All reports seem to indicate that the Iranian side of the negotiations was beginning to really make a lot of concessions on things like uranium enrichment, that they were willing to completely pause it, and that it wasn't in a place where it was going to be weaponized, and they were willing to completely stop it, allow inspections, allow verification. So then the goalposts moved, and then we talked about regime change for a little while, and then it came out, we needed to go immediately. And for a minute it was, we need to go immediately because they were about to have the capacity to attack the United States. But everybody knew that that was not true because they don't have intercontinental ballistic missiles. So they had to back off of that real quick. And it seems like basically what happened is from what I can tell so far, is that Israel had actionable intelligence that the Ayatollah and a bunch of his, top lieutenants and other people who would be in line for that job or other top jobs were going to be in one place, and there was an opportunity to strike and kill them. Now, we can have a debate about whether or not that is reason enough to start a war, but what we cannot do is pretend that there's some other reason for this, that that the United States suddenly was in imminent danger and that this is a defensive action. Yet that's what they're trying to do. While at the same time, as we'll get to a little bit later, acting in some cases when it's convenient as though this isn't a war, and then at other times saying that it is a war and boy, are we winning it. So let's go to this first clip from Pete Hegseth.
Finding and fixing their leaders and their military leaders. Flying over Tehran, flying over Iran, flying over their capital, flying over the IRGC, Iranian leaders looking up and seeing only U.S. and Israeli air power every minute of every day until we decide it's over. And Iran will be able to do nothing about it. B-2s, B-52s, B-1s, Predator drones, fighters, controlling the skies, picking targets. Death and destruction from the sky all day long. We're playing for keeps. Our warfighters have maximum authorities granted personally by the president and yours truly. Our rules of engagement are bold, precise, and designed to unleash American power, not shackle it. This was never meant to be a fair fight, and it is not a fair fight. We are punching them while they're down, which is exactly how it should be.
Okay, we're going to see a lot more of this over the next several days, an attempt to change what the actual debate is about. What they want is they want this to be a debate about whether or not we can establish air superiority over Iran, whether or not we can take out their navy, that sort of thing. And I understand why they want that, because we have the most powerful, most impressive, most expensive, and most lethal military in the history of the world. And in particular, we have the most dominant Navy and the most dominant Air Force, both with our projection of force through the Navy and with the Air Force's capabilities in the world. And there's nothing close, right? And then Israel's not that far behind us. I mean, there's nothing close, but like whatever's close is Israel. And they're also like the other half of this. So there is no question that we can do that. And what they want is they want to create a sort of a false argument here, as though the argument in this country between those who oppose the war and those who support it is one about whether or not we can actually achieve the objectives that Hegseth is talking about there. There is no doubt that we can do that and that we are doing that. Nobody has any doubt about that, but it doesn't answer the question of, is it smart for us to do it? Why are we doing it? And was it absolutely necessary that we do it, as opposed to continue to negotiate and try and achieve some objectives through diplomacy? Let's go to the next Hegseth clip.
Right here.
Secretary Hegseth, thank you. Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. You touched on this in your opening remarks, but I'm hoping you could expand on it a bit. It's been reported that Iran might be trying to outlast our ability to intercept their missiles. It sounds like you guys are saying they don't have the ability to do so. Is that the case? Can they outlast us in their ability to do that?
Iran cannot outlast us. We're going to ensure, through violence of action and our offensive capabilities and our defensive capabilities, as I said, that we set the tone and the tempo of this fight. That's why stories and speculation about different things that try to make it look like we're limited in what we can do. The only limits we have in this is President Trump's desire to achieve specific effects on behalf of the American people. And that's why we don't talk about, you can say 4 weeks, but it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 3. Ultimately, we set the pace and the tempo. The enemy is off balance, and we're going to keep them off balance. And we know their ability to shoot versus our ability to defend. That difference gets wider and wider every day. Our defense gets better. Their offensive capabilities diminish. As we are going into ammunitions that we, as we said, have tens of thousands of and can drop unlimited supplies on, with even more effects than the standoff munitions we have now, which is why when we say the throttle's going up, the throttle's going up, and it's going to stay on high. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so the question of whether or not Iran can outlast us is only partially a question of military capabilities. Hegseth chose to take that question through military capabilities. He chose to interpret that question because it works best for him to say, okay, I take this to mean, do we have enough missiles versus their missile defense? And in that way, I mean, I have no reason to think that he's wrong. I have no reason to believe that their missile defense is going to outlast our ability to, you know, supply missiles, particularly between us and Israel, and the ability to drop bombs through planes. I'm sure that he's right about that. But it really depends on what the objectives are here, and they keep changing. If the objective is regime change and we end up in some sort of insurgency situation, then yeah, it's entirely possible that Iran can outlast us, because it's not a matter of our military capabilities at that point. It's a matter of our country's will to continue the fight. And they don't want to get into that. They want to only talk about what happens when it comes to air superiority. And don't get me wrong, there is no reason to argue that substantially degrading to the point of possibly eliminating Iran's navy and even their air force is not a huge enhancement to the security of several states in the region, particularly Israel. But what they have not done and cannot do, Trump and Hegseth, is articulate why doing that is a direct enhancement to the national security of the United States. So if they still can't articulate why this was, why our national security was at stake, and what they don't want to say is, well, we basically feel that anything that would enhance Israel's national security is in our national security interest. If you have that belief, make that argument. They're not making that argument because they know that that argument won't sell, because the American people, largely on both sides of the aisle, don't believe that. Can you convince the American people that our national security interest and Israel's national security interests do coincide in some ways? Yes. Can you convince them that they coincide so perfectly and they're so perfectly aligned that we needed to launch a war of choice against Iran? Probably not. Which brings us to the argument about, or not the argument, but the sad reality that we have now lost American service members already, including, I believe, 4 Army reservists from just north of me here in Iowa. And look at the reaction that Hegseth has when he's asked about this.
Secretary Hegseth, thank you. Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. You touched on this in your opening remarks, but I'm hoping you could expand on it a bit. It's been reported that Iran might be trying to outlast our ability to intercept their missiles. It sounds like you guys are saying they don't have the ability to do so. Is that the case? Can we...
This is what the fake news misses.
Here we go.
We've taken control of Iran's airspace and waterways without boots on the ground. We control their fate. But when a few drones get through or tragic things happen, it's front page news. I get it. The press only wants to make the president look bad, but try for once to report the reality. The terms of this war will be set by us at every step.
Okay, first of all, when the media reports that American service members have been killed in combat, it is A, not fake news, and it is B, not for the purpose of making the president look bad. It's because when Americans die in combat on behalf of the rest of us, it's news. In fact, it's the biggest news. And if you believe that the reason that that's being reported on is because they want to make you look bad, then you need to get over yourself, Pete Hegseth, because that is not why it's being reported on. It's being reported on because a 20-year-old college student in Iowa is not going to live to see 21, and because two parents in Iowa who have been in the reserves and in the Army for a long time, each had kids. Just off the top of my head, of the 4 Iowans who were killed, because their families are going to be without them. And that is news. It's real news. And to act as though it's not is disgraceful. And frankly, somebody who served this country overseas, like Pete Hegseth, should know that and shouldn't approach this like, oh, some drones snuck through. Well, first of all, from what I've read so far, the reason that those drones were able to affect that attack is because our defenses in the Middle East at these bases still look a lot like they did when I was over there, which means they're built for vehicle-borne IEDs and for walk-up suicide bombers, meaning there's HESCO barriers on the front and there's nothing over the top, which is what made them vulnerable to drones. Not much different, for instance, than when we were over there and people were dying because they didn't have the proper armor on their vehicles or underneath because they weren't built for IED warfare. They need to take responsibility for the fact that they chose to go into a war without properly assessing how that threat was going to threaten our soldiers and therefore left them vulnerable. Now, with that said, the other important part of that clip is where he says that we've created air superiority and we have created superiority over their Navy without boots on the ground. Well, yeah, because you generally don't create air superiority or superiority over the water with boots on the ground. You generally do it with projected naval power and with air power. And there, like I said at the top of the show, there's no reason at any point to believe that we couldn't do that. It doesn't take anything away from the incredible feat that has been accomplished by the Air Force and the Navy, but that you don't brag about the fact that you created air superiority without boots on the ground. And what they're trying to dodge is the fact that they have walked back the initial claim that this was going to be a regime change war. And they kind of walk it back and then they walk it forward. They say that first they said, to the people of Iran, this is your opportunity to stand up because we've killed a bunch of your senior leadership. Never mind the fact that the Revolutionary Guard still has all the weapons, that they're still entirely invested in maintaining control of the country, that the regime is still in place, that apparently the selection has been of Khomeini's son. That's apparently the regime change, is that it's a new generation of supreme, leader. My point here is that you can't realistically talk about regime change in a place like Iran and then say that there's no boots on the ground. Look what we've accomplished, which is why they keep leaving open the option of boots on the ground. Let me be very clear. I oppose doing this war in the first place, and I certainly oppose putting boots on the ground. But let me also be clear that you're not at all remotely likely to achieve regime change in Iran, if that were truly your objective, without boots on the ground, which then brings you to the question of which boots are you going to put on the ground? What they believe they're going to accomplish right now, or what they're hinting at or trying to do, and I'm sure they are doing this, is that they've got the CIA and probably some elements of special forces on the ground trying to arm the Kurds and other resistance groups to try and give them the ability to take on the Revolutionary Guard and take over the country. Maybe that would work. It's extremely unlikely. It's extremely unlikely. It would take a whole lot of armament, a whole lot of training, and frankly, a whole lot more people than they have. Maybe it would work. If it does, that I want to say would be good. We don't really know what it would mean for the stability of the region. And the reason I say that is because it's not like there's a two-party system in Iran in the sense of there's the good guys and they're the bad guys. That's not how it works in any place in the Middle East. I can tell you from experience in Afghanistan and what I saw my friends go through in Iraq, once there is a power vacuum, if there does turn out to be a power vacuum, which again is unlikely, but if there does turn out to be a power vacuum, it's going to be filled by a range of groups. And then there's going to be fighting about who it's going to be. And the idea that you're going to get exactly what you want and that everybody's going to unify around it is pretty slim as a rule. So then you get the question of, okay, in order to get that kind of transition, if you did want a transition where, for instance, there's a big lobby to put in, the heir to the original Shah's throne, if you're going to get that, you're going to have boots on the ground. So which boots? Okay. If it's not American boots, it's not going to be Israeli boots. Israel's not going to occupy Iran. For one thing, all the other Middle Eastern Gulf states that are, tangentially sort of quasi on board with this, they ain't going to be on board at that point. So that's not an option. And Israel doesn't have any interest in that option. It's not going to be any of the Gulf states. They're not going to put their militaries in. And if they did, maybe they decided we're going to go in, we're going to carve up the oil, we're going to do that. Maybe it's in their interest to do that. You're going to have a massive insurgency in that situation because Iran is 90 to 95% Shia, and those states are pretty much 90% Sunni, right? So that's very unlikely to happen. And it really leaves the only option is the United States. So if they're serious about regime change in Iran, then they will have no choice but to put boots on the ground, which brings me back to the clip of a minute ago about Hegseth saying that they will not outlast us. Well, when it comes to America's will to fight, if you actually put boots on the ground, you can bet that they're going to outlast our will, because Americans do not want that. We've seen that literally next door in Iraq, what that insurgency looks like. So the idea of going after regime change here makes very little sense, which is why they've backed off of it. So we're going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about their interest in characterizing this war as not a war.
My family cat hears the news every morning with us, and honestly, she handles it better than I do, probably because she starts her day with Smalls. This podcast is sponsored by Smalls. Is the news making you want to cuddle up with your cat? Smalls fresh cat food is protein-packed and with recipes made with preservative-free, 100% human-grade ingredients you'd find in your fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. For a limited time, you can get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/majority54. Starting with Smalls is easy. Just share info about your cat's diet, health, food preferences, and then Smalls puts together a personalized meal plan for your cat. No more picking between random brands at the store. Smalls has the right food to satisfy any cat's cravings. Last time we fed our family cat, Sweetie, Smalls was this morning, and she loved it legitimately. We did a taste test. We put 2 bowls side by side, and she immediately went to Smalls. So our cat legitimately follows us around every morning until we give it to her. And if you're still not a believer in Smalls, Forbes ranks Smalls the best overall cat food, while BuzzFeed says my cats went completely ballistic for this stuff. Smalls is possibly my favorite sponsor because her cat's breath is just so much better. And her fur is so much softer since we switched to Smalls. This year's winter coat has been so soft and healthy. And after switching to Smalls, 88% of cat owners reported overall health improvements. And that's a big deal. So stop guessing which meals will upset their stomach. For a limited time, because you're a Majority 54 listener, you get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/majority. One last time, that's 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/majority54.
Look, magnesium is something most of us lack, and if you're taking the drugstore variant, you're still not getting the full picture. In industrial farming, chronic stress, and everyday aging all make it worse. Almost every supplement uses one form of magnesium, but magnesium comes in many forms, and each form helps your health in a different way. That's exactly why you need to try Qualia Magnesium Plus. Most people know that magnesium is critical for sleep, but some forms help muscle recovery, brain function, heart health, bone health, mood, and over 300 functions in the body. That's why Qualia Magnesium Plus is the only product to combine 10 bioavailable forms of magnesium with more than 70 trace minerals that help fuel magnesium support. It's full spectrum magnesium to deliver magnesium's full potential. Full body benefits include sleep deeper, think sharper, recover faster, support muscle strength, steadier mood and stress response, better energy and metabolism. And it's not just a sleep supplement. It's a full body magnesium system built for modern living to feel your best every day. And it's time to improve your sleep and enhance your recovery with Qualia Magnesium Plus. That's Qualia Magnesium Plus, and it's helped me a ton in my life, and I know it's going to help you a ton too. So experience the most trusted magnesium for purity, potency, and performance. Plus, it's non-GMO for those who are looking for that, vegan and gluten-free, making it a choice you can feel good about. Go to qualia.com/majority for 50% off. And here's a bonus. Use the code majority for an additional 15% off your order. That's QUALIA life.com/majority. Use the code majority. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode.
All right, there's a war powers resolution that's going to be voted on in the Senate imminently, and the Republicans are going to oppose it. The Democrats are going to be for it. But with that in mind, let's look at how Republicans in Congress are actually talking about this and what words they are using. Let's go to this first Johnson clip.
One last note, there's a misconception that Operation Epic Fury is in any way a diversion from Republican demands for peace. It's the opposite. Peace is not secured through appeasement. And it's certainly not secured by airdropping billions of dollars on terrorist regimes, which is what previous Democrat administrations had done. Peace is secured through strength. That is the principle that our party has stood for my entire life. And on principle before that, articulated the idea of peace through strength. That's what this administration is demonstrating, and that is why America is the last great superpower on the planet, and all freedom-loving people around the world are grateful to God for that.
Okay, what Johnson said after that star-spangled word salad is that the reason this doesn't count as a war is because Iran declared war on us. They've been chanting death to America. They have been trying to kill Americans around the world, and therefore they declared war on us. So Operation Epic Fury isn't a war. I'm sorry, when the Japanese declared war on us and then we declared war back, that was unnecessary for Congress to declare war back after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, because see, the other side had already declared war on us. So it was totally unnecessary. It makes no sense. Forget all this stuff for a minute, because if you get into an argument with your MAGA-loving friends in front of your MAGA-persuadable friends about whether or not, we declared war, we didn't, you just look like a scold. You just look like you're trying to get people to fill out their TPS reports. Here's what you need to focus on. The reason that by tradition and by constitution in the United States, in order to engage in a war, the president has to go to Congress is not because Congress is special. It's because the American people are supposed to consent to going to into a war. And Congress is our proxy for that. They stand in our place. And you're supposed to have to go to the American people and make a case to them about why it is important for us to go to war, so that you can then get their representatives to sign off on it. And furthermore, it is important that members of Congress actually stake their political careers on this, so that it's not exclusively, say, a second-term president who can't run again who's staking themselves on it, but actually people who have to get elected again, so that it's a little bit harder to go to war. That's why the Bush administration had to come up with all sorts of hot garbage to make up in order to go into Iraq. And it's also why a bunch of members of Congress lost their re-elections after we went into Iraq. That's how it's supposed to work. And it's what keeps us from just going to war all the damn time. Let's go to the second Johnson clip.
Participated. They have communicated at great length the details of the operation, both to Congress and to the American people. I think you can make an argument this is the most transparent administration in U.S. history. The Commander-in-Chief himself has been very forthright and very vocal about what's going on, answering questions and providing the insights that I think that people need. We're
defending the corruption and the secrecy of the Trump administration by calling them transparent is like Mike Johnson's favorite little hobby. And they do this all the time, as if, like, if somebody walks right up to you, punches you in the face, then steals your wallet, as long as they told you beforehand they were planning to punch you in the face and steal your wallet, it's totally cool. That's not how transparency actually works. And it's certainly not how you defend against the argument of corruption. But put that aside for a moment and keep in mind the fact that Donald Trump gave a State of the Union days before this invasion and didn't spend the majority of it, or even like very much of it at all, making a case as to why this was important. In fact, we were all so surprised by it that they didn't even have a plan to get Americans out of the Middle East. There's lots of Americans stuck in the Middle East right now, hoping that one of these missiles from Iran doesn't actually hit the hotel or wherever they are staying. So they didn't plan for it, and they didn't communicate about it at all. And they keep changing the reason as to why it was important. In every possible way, this is a war of choice that we didn't have to enter into, and that has been, frankly, handled really poorly because they don't know what they want out of it. So this has been my little explanation for you as to how you can communicate about this with friends in your life and try and persuade more people that this is something worth being really upset about. So I'll be back next week. I'll be on with my friend Zach Walls from Iowa. We'll spend the entire hour together, and then Ravi will be back the week after that. So I will see you soon. Please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Midas Mighty. And remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.